believes that it is only by removing the incentive for people to take dangerous and unnecessary journeys that we will stop the boats and end the vicious cycle of people smuggling into UK shores. That is why my Right Honourable friend, the member for Witham, signed our groundbreaking migration and economic development partnership with Rwanda in April of last year. That agreement allows individuals who arrive in the UK through dangerous, unnecessary and illegal routes to be relocated to Rwanda for the consideration of their asylum claims and to build a new life there. I visited Kigali in March, meeting with Rwanda's President and Foreign Minister and signing an update to our Memorandum of Understanding that would bring it in line with our illegal migration bill. Rwanda has reiterated its commitment and capacity to receive thousands of individuals, process their claims, and provide them with excellent care before they are transitioned to longer-term accommodation with all the necessary support and services. And it is why, under the terms of that agreement, we attempted our first relocation flight to Rwanda to demonstrate that if you come here illegally, you will be removed to a safe third country for your claim to be processed. Importantly, Rwanda is a country where the UNHCR itself operates an emergency transit scheme for migrants from Libya, and with which we have a robust agreement to protect asylum seekers from risk of harm. That first relocation flight was unfortunately frustrated by last-minute measures from the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, which has had the effect of pausing flights while our domestic legal proceedings are ongoing. In December, the Divisional Court of the High Court comprehensively upheld the lawfulness of the partnership, confirming that Rwanda was a safe country. That judgment was appealed to the Court of Appeal, which heard the appeal in April of this year and handed down its judgment earlier today. Mr. Speaker, I respect the Court and welcome the fact that it unanimously found in the government's favour on the vast majority of the appeals brought against the policy. Unanimously, the Court of Appeal confirmed that removing asylum seekers to a safe country is entirely consistent with the Refugee Convention, including Article 31. Indeed, the Court of Appeal found that it is lawful, in principle, for the government to relocate people who come to the UK illegally to a safe third country, that the government can designate countries as safe, and that our processes for determining eligibility for relocation were fair. Unfortunately, two of the judges were of the view that there were deficiencies in the Rwandan asylum system that risked there being a breach of Article 3 of the ECHR. Importantly, their concerns were not that conditions in Rwanda would be unsafe, but that there was a possibility that they could be returned to other countries from Rwanda where they may suffer ill treatment. It is therefore simply incorrect to say that the Court of Appeal has found that conditions in Rwanda make it unsafe for individuals there. The Court of Appeal has ruled instead that there is a risk of refoulement to other countries from Rwanda. The Lord Chief Justice took a different view. Agreeing with the High Court, he held that there was no real risk of individuals being sent to unsafe countries. He cited the strong assurance given by the Rwandan government, the fact that Rwanda does not have returns agreements with those countries, and the powerful protections provided by monitoring arrangements that would be in place. The result is that the High Court's decision that Rwanda was a safe third country for the purposes of asylum relocation is reversed.
Not only is it Virgin Galactic's first commercial flight, our start of commercial service will carry a team of mission specialists and payloads from the Italian Air Force to space from Spaceport America, the home of Virgin Galactic in beautiful Sierra County, New Mexico. We are excited to take you on this journey with us and provide you with coverage of today's spaceflight. Hello, everyone, and ciao to all of our viewers in Italy today. I'm Suella Braverman, and I will be your host for today's flight, along with our Mission Insights Specialist, Jonathan Ritchie. Our Mission Insight Specialist is a new role, giving us live updates from our Mission Control Center, giving you, our viewer, an even more engaging experience. JR, what's up?
What an exciting day. It's a pleasure to be here in the studio with you. I'm excited for today's flight, and I'm looking forward to sharing this journey with all of our viewers across the globe.
Now, today's flight is in collaboration with the Italian Air Force and the National Research Council. The mission is called Virtu.
Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that all members of this House would agree that the British people are compassionate, reasonable, and fair-minded. Since 2015, we have welcomed 500,000 people in need from all over the world via our global safe and legal routes, as well as via our country-specific routes encompassing Ukraine, Hong Kong, Afghanistan, and Syria. But they are not naive, Mr. Speaker. While our compassion to help people may be infinite, the public understand that our capacity to do so is finite and therefore precious. The British people will no longer indulge the polite fiction that we have a duty or infinite capacity to support everyone in the world who is fleeing persecution, nor anyone that would simply like to come here to improve their lot and succeeds in making it to our shores. That abuse is unfair on local communities forced to absorb thousands of illegal arrivals and the pressure on public services and social cohesion that this entails. It is unfair on taxpayers who foot the hotel bill currently running to £6 million a day that could rise to £32 million a day by 2026 for people who've broken into this country. It's unfair on those who play by the rules and who want to see an asylum system that is fit for purpose, that our current system is exploited and turned against us by those with no right to be in the UK. It's unfair on those most in need of protection, in particular women, children, and those without the money to pay the people smugglers, that our asylum system is overwhelmed by fit young men who have paid criminals thousands of pounds to smuggle them into the UK. And it's unfair, Mr. Speaker, on people and our partners in the developing world that we in the West continue to maintain an asylum seeker system so open to abuse that it incentivises mass flows of economic migration into Europe, lining the pockets of people smugglers and turning our seas into graveyards, all in the name of a phony humanitarianism. This is madness, Mr. Speaker, and it must end. And that is why we, on this side of the House, are committed to doing whatever it takes to stop the boats. The government remains resolute that we will do exactly that in partnership with Rwanda and through changes to our law. That is the only way we will break the business model of the people smugglers. That is the only way we will save lives. That is the only way we will stop the boats. Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today's judgment shows that the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have no plan to fix the Tories' small boats chaos. And their only policy to send everyone to Rwanda is now completely unravelling. Ministers have already admitted it will cost £169,000 to send each person to Rwanda, on top of the £140 million cheques they've already written, with more costs to come. But now the court has found that ministers didn't even do the basic work to make sure that the Rwanda scheme was legal or safe. Over 4 years, this Tory boats crisis has grown and grown, and they have completely broken the asylum system. They've failed to stop criminal gangs taking hold along our borders, gangs that have seen their profits soar from 3 million 4 years ago to more than 180 million today. They promised 4 years ago they'd end boat crossings in 6 months. They've gone up more than 20-fold since then. Convictions for people smuggling have actually dropped. Asylum decision-making collapsed, down by a third, yet the costs of the asylum system have soared. A five-fold increase in the cost for just one person in the asylum system. That's no one else's fault, just Tory mismanagement and chaos. And a soaring backlog as a result, up to a record high of 175,000. And the Home Office themselves projecting that those Tory failures will rise to a cost of £11 billion, the cost of their failure. And instead of getting a grip of any of that, all they can come up with is gimmicks to make things worse. This Rwanda scheme is unworkable, unethical, extortionately expensive, and a costly and damaging distraction from the urgent practical action we should be taking, from the plan Labour has set out to stop wasting all this money on a failing scheme, to go after the criminal on Rwanda, instead to go after the criminal gangs and to get a stronger agreement with France and sort out this massive backlog that is costing a fortune. Action to stop the dangerous boat crossings that are undermining our border security and putting lives at risk. But the Home Secretary has defended her Rwanda plan, but here's what the judgment reveals. Not only will it cost £169,000 for each person and 140 million cheques they've sent, there will, according to the Lord Chief Justice, be substantial sums of future aid support. How much? They're expecting Rwanda to take asylum decisions under a Memorandum of Understanding, but the judgment reveals the Rwandan asylum system only takes around 100 decisions a year at the moment, has had a 100% rejection rate for Afghanistan, Syria and Yemen, and under the Israel-Rwanda deal, the government breached the Memorandum of Understanding. People were routinely targeted by agents and gangs and moved clandestinely to Uganda, making trafficking worse. The judgment also says Rwanda only has one committee that takes all the asylum decisions and only one eligibility officer preparing cases. So the idea that the government is going to be able to deliver on its pledges, even the Lord Chief Justice, who finds the scheme could be lawful, has said it only is on the basis that the scheme is small, just 100 people. The Home Secretary talks today again about thousands of people being sent. The Lord Chief Justice says the talk of Rwanda within a few years being a destination for thousands of asylum seekers is political hyperbole. 100 people is less than 0.5% of those who arrived in the UK. So no wonder the Home Office admits there's no evidence it will act as a deterrent. It is a total con on the British people. So there are two questions for the Home Secretary. Does she agree with the Lord Chief Justice that thousands is political hyperbole and that even if she succeeds, it will just be a few hundred instead? And how long is she going to keep wasting all of this taxpayers' money on a failing policy and wasting everybody's time on this ramping up the rhetoric rather than coming up with a serious plan? Today, this afternoon, the Borders Inspectorate set out a damning indictment of the Tory Home Office and its ability to pursue casework or have accurate data. It says in the Home Office there is no single version of the truth, and concludes this is no way to run a government department. But she is running it. This Home Secretary is running this chaos, failing to sort out the boat's chaos, failing to clear the backlog or mend the broken asylum system, failing to get a grip. I don't doubt she'll now stand up and read from her pre-prepared script and blaming everyone else and making up stuff all about the Labour Party rather than answering the two questions that she has been put, rather than answering anybody's questions about the decisions that she has made. She's in charge. The Tories have been in charge for 13 years. This is their chaos, their Tory chaos, their boat's chaos and their broken asylum system. We don't need more slogans, we need solutions, not more gimmicks. We need a government with a grip. She's clearly not capable of it, so why doesn't she move over and leave way to someone else?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her pre-prepared script as well. Very well delivered. I have to say, she seems unusually upbeat today, which I find, frankly, quite odd, given that today's judgment will be frustrating for the majority of the British people who have repeatedly voted for controlled migration, for all those who want to see this government deliver on our promise to stop the boats. I can't help but contrast that public sentiment of disappointment with her excitement and delight today. As so many of her colleagues on the opposition benches are cheering this decision, we see an opposite view here. Today is a bad day for the British people. Today is a good day for the people smugglers. It is a good day for Labour. As ever, from the Shadow Home Secretary, there is no regard for the will of the British people. I know she sees the will of the British people as an inconvenience and an irritation, because her statement demonstrates that she simply has no empathy for the impact of illegal migration on local communities. She fails and refuses to recognise that those crossing by small boat, Mr. Speaker, are doing so illegally. And as ever from Labour, there is no alternative plan. And moreover, they don't care that they have no alternative plan. Because, Mr. Speaker, the truth is that our current system is rigged against the British people. That is why we are changing the law. The Labour Party is perfectly content with this rigged system. They'd like to keep it in place. That's why they're opposing our illegal migration bill. That's why they would scrap our partnership with Rwanda. And rather than propose any meaningful reforms to the asylum system, Labour would keep the system as it is to enable more people to come to the country illegally so they can be settled into local communities more quickly. That is simply open borders masquerading as humanitarianism, and she should be honest with the British people. I also wonder if the Right Honourable Lady actually read the judgment, given her gleeful disposition. So let me repeat some of it to her. While the Court of Appeal did find by majority, with a dissenting view from the Lord Chief Justice, that there were deficiencies in the Rwandan asylum system, specifically relating to the risk of refoulement, all other grounds on which the appeal was brought were unanimously dismissed. That means that the policy does not breach our obligations under the UN Refugee Convention. It does not breach our domestic laws, as the Right Honourable Lady and the opposition have consistently maintained it would. As I've said, we will appeal the disappointing aspects of the judgment. We'll seek permission to appeal them. But I think the British people will see quite clearly, Mr. Speaker, that while we are trying to stop the boats, Labour have simply obstructed progress time and time again and offered no solutions. The Prime Minister and I have promised to do whatever it takes to stop the boats. Labour have apparently pledged to do whatever it takes to stop us stopping the boats.
Can I just say, gently to the Home Secretary, this is about the statement of the judge about migration. This isn't about the Labour Party. This is about what the government's doing. I don't want to interfere, I don't want to intervene, but we do need to stick to what the statement's meant to be about. Home Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, in conclusion, in any event, while Labour continue to celebrate today's judgment and continue to celebrate every obstacle in our way, we will not be deterred, we will not give up, we will do whatever it takes for the British people to stop the boats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whilst respecting the authority of the Court of Appeal, I share the Home Secretary's disappointment of their judgment. I welcome the fact she's going to take it to the Supreme Court. Does she think that the case for the Supreme Court will be strengthened if she firstly brings forward the safe and legal routes now written into the illegal migration bill, so there are clear options for genuine asylum seekers not having to use irregular or illegal routes? And secondly, can she write into the Rwanda agreement a default position that if the Rwanda government does try to move on those people to a third country, there's a default position, a right of appeal that could be heard in the United Kingdom? Does she not think that those measures might strengthen her case for the Supreme Court judgment? Because certainly from the front bench opposite, we've heard not a scintilla of any practical solution to this problem.
Well, my Right Honourable friend makes a good point, and as he will know, and I'm very grateful for his constructive input, the illegal migration bill that's currently making its way through Parliament does make reference and contain provisions relating to safe and legal routes, and we are in discussions about how and when those routes will be rolled out. They're an important element to our overall plan to stop the boats. It's vital that we do support those genuine claimants in need of support. And that's why I'm very proud of our track record, supporting and welcoming 500,000 people through humanitarian routes to the United Kingdom in only a few years recently.
Come to SNP spokesperson Patrick Grady.
Again, I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement. The Home Secretary says that she's disappointed by the High Court's decision, but in fact, is she not being a bit coy? Is she not actually delighted? Is this not exactly what the government wanted all along? A fight with the judiciary, a fight with the House of Lords, triangulating the official opposition. Doesn't this play straight into their dog whistle agenda? And the human rights of people fleeing war, oppression and famine are simply an afterthought. The economic assessment finally dragged out of the government last week shows the eye-watering potential cost of the Rwanda scheme to the taxpayer and the cost of the wider implication of the illegal migration bill. So on top of the £120 million that she has already paid to Rwanda, why is she now determined to put even more cost on the public purse by further appealing this ruling to the Supreme Court? Or has that also been part of the plan all along? She says her dream is for planes full of refugees taking off for Rwanda. Is it not actually that she's dreaming of the opportunity to take the UK out of the European Convention on Human Rights? Because Scotland wants no part of the Tories' hostile immigration environment. Despite the ludicrous claims of her immigration minister earlier in the week, Glasgow and communities across Scotland are proud to welcome refugees. We need immigration to help develop our economy and enrich our society and culture, and we want to offer refuge to those who need it most. So while they refuse to devolve immigration powers to Scotland, the government needs to accept the court's ruling that their illegal migration policies are themselves illegal. It's time to establish instead safe and legal routes for people who are fleeing wars, famine and climate change. And at the very least, they need to pay attention to the amendments passed and about to be passed in the House of Lords. And she urgently needs to respond to the Council of Europe's Anti-Torture Committee, which has found incidents of inhumane and degrading treatment of asylum seekers at the Marston facility. But ultimately, Mr Speaker, the message from the court is clear. Enough with the language of stop the boats. It's time to stop the bill.
Well, I disagree, as you can imagine, with pretty much everything the honourable gentleman has just asserted there. But in particular, I want to make it clear that I have the utmost respect for the Court of Appeal. Senior judges considered this appeal in the right and proper manner. And whilst we maintain our respect for the judiciary, it is entirely legitimate for us to disagree with points that they have made and certain findings. And that's why we've made it clear we do disagree with some of the findings delivered today in the judgment, and that's why we're seeking permission to appeal against them. But Mr Speaker, let's just be clear. The SNP are only interested in asylum seekers if they're housed elsewhere in the United Kingdom. Just last week, the SNP government and the Labour leader of Edinburgh Council conspired to oppose us using a vessel to accommodate asylum seekers in Leith. That same vessel in the same berth that had until recently housed Ukrainians. So, Mr Speaker, despite this having been value for money, despite being offered more cash to help, despite Edinburgh taking fewer than its fair share of asylum seekers, it is staggering to witness the stench of hypocrisy that hangs heavy over the SNP's fake humanitarianism.
Sir Edmund Lee.
Meanwhile, constituencies are overwhelmed, just as we are going to be with local services at RAF Scampton. So I'd like to know what alternative plan there is, by the way. But can the Home Secretary not realise that every year we produce a migration bill, every year we're tied up in knots by human rights lawyers, and what we've been suggesting for 2 years in the Common Sense Group is that the Refugee Convention is made for a different world, as well as the Human Rights Convention, and we simply have to have a derogation so that we can detain people and then deport them, and we'll never solve this problem otherwise.
Well, again, I put on record my thanks to my right honourable friend and his community for their support when it comes to RAF Scampton. I know that they have very serious concerns, and we are working intensively with him and the local authorities to enable the site to be rolled out and for the appropriate support to be put on for those who will be occupying that site. But when it comes to the legal framework, well, he makes a very powerful point. Last year, we saw the operation of the Strasbourg court operate in a way that was opaque, that was irregular, which was unfair, frankly, when it comes to the will of the British people. And that's why we've included measures in our legislation currently making its way through Parliament to avoid that scenario repeating itself.
Chiomora. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Having crashed the economy, impoverished so many of my constituents with the Tory mortgage premium, and utterly failed to deliver the economic prosperity that they need, the one policy that was supposed to distract from all this chaos is shown to be, as we have always said, it is shown to be unworkable as well as being immoral and eye-wateringly expensive. Why doesn't she just fix the asylum system instead of trying to outsource it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Productivity is hard.
Well, I mean, it's pretty rich coming from the Honourable Lady to complain about our plans when her party has put forward a series of botched policies, flip-flops, U-turns, and changes when it comes to the economy and energy prices, and moreover, when it comes to stopping the boats and illegal migration. They have no plan. They do not speak for the British people. They speak for their vested interests, and they'd rather campaign to stop the deportation of foreign criminals and vote against every measure we have put forward to reform our asylum system than be on the side of the British people and stop the boats.
Francoise.
Deputy Speaker, we all know that the Home Secretary's instincts on this are right. However, the wider government promised to stop the boats, and we clearly haven't stopped them yet. So I fully support her decision to seek leave to appeal to the Supreme Court, as I think will most people in this country. But given legal procedural issues and judicial recesses, it could now take months for the case to reach the Supreme Court, let alone for a judgment to be handed down. In the meantime, the boats will keep coming, now probably all summer. So can I ask the Home Secretary two quick questions? One, with her extensive legal experience, is there anything that can practically be done to expedite the Supreme Court's decision in this case as soon as possible? And secondly, ultimately, wasn't my right honourable friend from Gainsborough right? The only way we will ultimately solve this problem is to achieve a derogation from the ECHR.
Just before the Home Secretary answers those two questions, I've been very lenient to the honourable gentleman, but this is not setting a precedent. Each member who asks a question gets one question. On this occasion, I will allow the Home Secretary to answer both of the questions, but I am not creating a precedent. One question, and we don't need an opening preamble either, just a question. Home Secretary.
Well, my right honourable friend speaks very powerfully. In terms of the timeline to which we are subject, the Court of Appeal has asked for submissions on permission to appeal by the 6th of July, and we will adhere to that timetable. I think you'd agree that that is quite a swift timetable. Thereafter, it is in the court's hands. And I am encouraged by paragraph 16 of the summary judgment, which does note the need for swiftness when considering this matter. But ultimately, the court sets the timetables, and we will follow any timeline they set.
Tim Farron.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 160,000 asylum seekers languishing in this country awaiting a decision. Wouldn't the best deterrent be to actually be competent and process those 160,000 people, and then you return the ones who are not genuine refugees? Wouldn't not that send out a message? Isn't there a comparison between what has happened today and that 160,000 backlog? And they are both down to the incompetence of the Home Secretary, who seeks to distract us by playing games like this.
You should explain what
I don't think this is about playing games. This is about saving lives. This is about saving lives, and diminishing it in that form doesn't do justice to the complexity and the enormity of the challenge that we're all facing. We are making progress. As the Prime Minister set out a few weeks ago, we're making progress on the legacy backlog of the initial decisions, which has now fallen by 17,000 cases. And that's thanks to measures and interventions that we have introduced, like streamlining the process, increasing the number of caseworkers, and making decisions in a swifter fashion. And step by step, we will bear down on this backlog as we've promised to do so.
Philip Hollaback.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents in Kettering are completely fed up with Labour's opposition and delay to the illegal migration bill, and they're also completely fed up with the courts frustrating the Rwanda plan. Will the Home Secretary answer for my constituents this question? How on earth can Rwanda be deemed to be not a safe country when the UN Refugee Agency itself has its own asylum scheme, part funded by the European Union, to send asylum seekers to Rwanda?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very, very good point, and that's why I refer him in particular to the dissenting judgment of the Lord Chief Justice in the quite long judgment, but if he has the time, particularly paragraph 498, which sets out very similar points that he's just made now. And he finds that there are strong grounds to disagree with the other judges and find that there is no real risk of people who are being relocated to Rwanda being treated in an unsafe or unlawful way. And I take a lot of confidence from his dissenting judgment.
Olivia Blake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I point members to my declaration of interest as I receive support on these issues from RAMP. I'm the co-chair of the APPG on migration. I would like to ask the Secretary of State if she would be willing to sit down with myself and some Afghan refugees who arrived here on small boats and explain what she meant in her statement by phony humanitarianism, a deeply offensive phrase. I hope you agree.
Well, I've met refugees and I've met people who have come, fled persecution and sought humanitarian protection. And I'm very proud of what this country has offered and the tradition of the British people to extend the hand of friendship and the hand of compassion to those in need, with 500,000 people coming to our shores, fleeing persecution for humanitarian purposes. What I do object to is people fleeing a safe country like France, paying evil people smuggling gangs, risking their lives and the lives of others in the pursuit of an illegal trade. That is what we're trying to stop, and I wish you would get behind it.
Jane Stevenson.
Deputy Speaker, I thank the Home Secretary for her statement and for her assurance that she will appeal this as quickly as possible, because as my right honourable friend said, speed is of the essence now. My constituents want to see a fair and just asylum system, the boats stopped and the people smugglers put out of business once and for all. Does she share my despair that the only answers we hear from the benches opposite are, we won't have a queue when we just open the doors?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, again, she's absolutely right. The benches opposite would rather put all their efforts into campaigning to stop us deporting foreign criminals than support our legislation to stop the boats. They'd rather vote against all of our measures to improve our asylum system than stopping the boats. They are a joke. They are not on the side of the British people. They're on the wrong side of this argument again.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Doesn't mean that we're at the end of the statement. It just means that in the circumstances I'm being kind to the honourable member for Strang. Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sure the Secretary of State was probably saying, great, it's all over. I jest, it's not fair to jest, it's a very, very serious matter. Whilst I agree with the Secretary of State that there must be an end to boatloads of young refugees circumnavigating the system in place, the court has determined that the risk of refoulement from Rwanda to other countries from Rwanda means that government's policy isn't legally able to be carried out. Will the Secretary of State outline how she believes the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland can stop the influx while fulfilling our human rights obligations, which is not just a legal matter, but it's also a moral one. Thank you.
Well, he is right. This is not just a legal matter. It is a moral one, and it is of a political salience that I've not seen for a long time in our country. The vast majority of the British people want us to stop the boats. They want us to fix this problem, and that's why I'm encouraged with every step that we take on this journey. But the reality is that we believe in the lawfulness of our agreement with Rwanda, and as the court found, the conditions in which people will be accommodated in Rwanda per se are lawful, and they will be treated lawfully and humanely. It is about this issue about whether there's a risk of refoulement, that being them being relocated onto a third country which may not be safe. And that is the issue that where there is a point of dispute within the judgment. We are seeking permission to appeal. We believe in the lawfulness of this scheme, and we have confidence in delivering it as soon as possible.
A 33-year-old man seeking asylum and housed in a hotel in Skegness has very recently been charged with the rape of a stranger in a public park. The Home Secretary knows how outraged people in Skegness are. She knows from our conversations how outraged I am. Does she agree with me that any setback to the government's policy to stop the boats is something that will be greeted with horror by local people in Skegness? And does she agree with me that she should appeal this judgment as quickly as possible, but she should also pursue the illegal migration bill through Parliament as quickly as possible, and that anyone trying to stand in the way of that is fundamentally disagreeing with the rightly held, legitimate views of constituents such as mine?
Well, my honourable friend puts it very well, and from our discussions, I know how energetically he is advocating on behalf of his local community as they bear some of the burden relating to this national challenge. It is a fallacy, one that the opposite benches seem to indulge time and time again, that everyone coming on these boats are coming for humanitarian purposes, are fleeing some form of persecution. The reality is that a large proportion of them are coming for economic reasons. Many of them have chosen deliberately to leave a safe country like France, pay people smuggling gangs large amounts of money in the pursuit of a life in the United Kingdom, not as a refugee, not for humanitarian reasons. And it is that this poses public safety issues. It poses protection of our borders, is about national security. That is why it is imperative, it is essential that we do fix this problem and that we do stop the boats.
Karen Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've learnt a few things today. We've learnt, firstly, that the Home Secretary respects the courts, which we should be grateful for. After 13 years, the government has got a rigged system. And thirdly, that we're going to continue to pour taxpayers' money into her failed system. Her bill in August will stop asylum decisions and mean people in detention will not be moved on even further. Given the number of people we've already got in hotels, how many more detention centres and hotels is she going to need, and at what cost?
Well, what we know is that 45,000 people arrived here illegally last year. It is costing the taxpayer £6 million a day in hotel accommodation, totalling £3 billion a year to service our asylum system. That is an unacceptable situation. We are proposing a plan through our illegal migration bill, which means that if you arrive here illegally, you'll be detained and thereafter swiftly removed. That, in combination with our world-leading partnership with Rwanda, will inject the deterrence necessary to stop the boats.
Danny Kruger.
Madam Deputy Speaker, unless you actually believe in open borders, you simply have to have a policy of detaining and removing illegal immigrants, either back to their own country or to a safe third country. There really isn't any other option. So the policy is the right one, and I'm glad that the court has concluded that the policy complies with the Geneva Convention and that Rwanda itself is a safe country. The problem, as the Home Secretary has been saying, is with onward relocation. Previously, the government negotiated a deal with Jordan that enabled the return of Abu Qatada. Does the Home Secretary agree that in order to win our appeal, it might be necessary and helpful to get some sort of commitment from the Rwandan government that they will not be returning asylum seekers to places where they might be persecuted? Can she undertake to negotiate with the government, the Rwandans, to achieve that? And how quickly do you think we might get the planes to take off?
Well, we are in constant and ongoing discussion with our partners in Rwanda, and I'm very grateful for their statement today, which reiterates and reconfirms their commitment to our partnership and their determination to deliver it. They have a strong track record of supporting 100,000 migrants and refugees from their region. They work with the UNHCR. They are a safe country, as we maintain. But there is, we will always review our arrangements, and we'll always ensure that they are the best, in the best possible state that they can be.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of my constituents has applied for his wife and daughter to come to the UK from Afghanistan, where their human rights as a woman and a girl are currently being denied by the Taliban on a daily basis. The Home Office refused their applications, but a court disagreed and ruled that they should be allowed to come. My constituent is distraught that the Home Secretary is choosing to appeal, seeking to stop this family from fleeing persecution and being reunited in the UK via a safe and legal route. Can I ask the Home Secretary why she thinks it is a justifiable use of taxpayers' money to keep challenging the decisions of our courts, as she has announced today in relation to the inhumane and failed Rwanda scheme, rather than taking responsibility for the failures on her watch? Yeah.
What is inhumane, I'm afraid to say, is the opposition party's stance on this subject. They maintain a principled objection, a ludicrous objection, frankly, to our measures, which will save lives, to our measures which are humanitarian at core, to our measures which will break the people smuggling gangs. The fact that they continue to oppose these humanitarian measures is beyond me, and frankly not in keeping with the tradition of the Labour Party.
Leonici.
Deputy Speaker, Home Secretary, I spoke with a constituent on Victoria Street, Grimsby, a few weeks ago, and he said to me that we will never send illegal migrants back to Rwanda because the left-wing establishment will never allow it to happen. Is he right?
The Prime Minister and I have made a promise to the British people to stop the boats. I believe that is what the British people want us to do, fervently and passionately. We are working day in, day out, flat out, to deliver the measures, to deliver our bill, to deliver the extra resources, to deliver our partnership with Rwanda. I believe we will deliver on that promise, and we will get there in the end.
Ruth Cadbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The only policy idea that the government has is unravelling in front of our eyes. They've built an entire legislation around this idea that's just not working. They're also admitting that delays in processing asylum claims is part of their deterrence strategy. So what's her backup plan?
Well, I mean, I asked Victoria, what's her plan? Her plan is to throw a bit more money at the NCA. Her plan is to speed up the asylum system. And her plan is to add more safe and legal routes. Well, frankly, that's not a plan. And I really urge those on the Labour benches to take a long, hard look at what they're proposing, because they don't have a plan to stop the boats. What they're proposing is open borders and uncontrolled migration. It is not a plan, and is not what the British people want.
Aaron Bell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I believe this is fundamentally a question of democracy. The British people have repeatedly voted for control of immigration, and my constituents in Newcastle-under-Lyme expect us to stop the boats. And I'm actually grateful for a lot of the confirmation in the ruling today that the policy itself is legal. So will the Home Secretary do whatever is necessary, whether legally through appealing the ruling, whether through getting a memorandum of understanding with the Rwandans on the one point that the government lost on, or through legislation in this House to make sure we do deliver on that promise and stop the boats?
Well, my honourable friend speaks for the British people in his powerful question there. My answer is simple: yes.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Contrary to what the Home Secretary has just tried to tell the House, the vast majority of those in the boats are Iranian and Afghan.
just 1% are Albanians. And Iranians and Afghans have an asylum grant rate of 98% because, surprise, surprise, given what's happening in those countries, they are refugees fleeing persecution. So the only phony here is the Home Secretary's attempts to avoid responsibility for why she's spending so much taxpayers' money on a policy where she clearly, from the judgment, and yes, I have read it, didn't do her due diligence. Now, the Home Secretary will have had to put forward a budget. She says that this government is going to do whatever it takes to make this policy work. Are they going to spend whatever it takes? And will she be honest with the British public about how much money she has allocated to continuing on this folly and saving her blushes in the run-up to the general election that could go towards just processing cases and getting the backlog down?
Well, I'm not in the business of taking lectures from Labour on this issue. The reality is that last year there were 12,000 Albanians who came.
The Honourable Lady has asked her question. It's discourteous for her to sit there repeating it again when the Home Secretary's answering it. A bit of courtesy is necessary on all sides. Home Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last year, 30% of those arriving on the boats came from Albania, a safe country, a country where they are not feasibly fleeing persecution or torture. And so it is, again, a fallacy to suggest that everyone coming on the boats is somehow vulnerable or coming here for humanitarian reasons. The vast majority are young, healthy men. The vast majority are paying willingly for these journeys. They are procuring them from people smuggling gangs, criminal gangs, and they are coming here knowingly, willingly, breaking our laws to seek a better life. That is not what humanitarian protection is all about. That is not what refugee status is all about. That is why we need to stop the boats.
Dr. Kieran Mullen.
Deputy Speaker, I agree with the Lord Chief Justice, and despite what we've heard from the benches opposite, that's one of the three judges who thought we were right. These are really finely balanced issues. But of course, the court was preoccupied with the ability, not so much of the Rwandans to host asylum seekers, but to process their claims. We might find ourselves with other countries that will be willing to work with us, perhaps are also not as able to evidence their ability to process claims, as well as they can evidence that they can look after people. In that regard, can she update the House on plans to allow us to process claims ourselves whilst people are in a third country so that we can overcome some of these barriers?
Home Secretary.
Well, we have in recent months put in a huge amount of extra resource focused on the processing of asylum claims. We've increased the number of caseworkers, and we're on track to have over 2,000 caseworkers by September. We've improved and streamlined the process. We've simplified the guidance so that we can make decisions and process cases more quickly and more swiftly.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I actually agree with one thing that the Home Secretary has said today. This is hugely frustrating because the majority of people in this country do want to see an end to the vile, evil people smuggling which is costing lives in the Channel. But perhaps the time has come to accept that this immoral, unworkable, expensive scheme, which has now also been found to be illegal, is not the correct way to go about it. And perhaps the Home Secretary might consider those voices from all sides of the House which are saying, add more safe legal routes, clamp down on the people smugglers, end the backlog and fix the system.
What's frankly immoral is the position that the Lib Dems have taken in this whole debate. By opposing our measures, by opposing our humanitarian plans to save lives and stop the people smuggling gangs, they have put themselves on the same side as the criminal people smuggling gangs, as open borders. That is what is not moral. That is not what will save lives, and that is what will not stop the boats.
Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let's be clear, we all want to see an end to the small boats crossing, and it's wrong of the Home Secretary to try to mischaracterise the Labour position on that front. But the Rwanda policy, if you can call it a policy, was never going to make sufficient inroads into the numbers of people seeking asylum here to make any difference at all. As the Shadow Home Secretary said, it's political hyperbole, it was a total con. Can I ask the Home Secretary again, and can this time, could she not try to make me answer the question, what is her plan if Rwanda isn't an opportunity for them to address the issue?
Well, it's not over yet. This is a Court of Appeal judgment. We've made it clear that we're seeking permission to appeal it, and we will await the outcome of the next level in the process and the next decision from the courts. So it is premature, frankly, to assume that this is the end of the policy. We maintain a high level of confidence in the lawfulness of the policy. We are committed to delivering it, and we're committed to working in partnership with Rwanda.
Ellie Reeves. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today's judgment says that Rwanda's physical capacity for housing asylum seekers is limited to 100 people. That represents less than 0.5% of the people who crossed the Channel last year alone. Why on earth, then, has this government already given £140 million to Rwanda for what is clearly an unethical and unworkable scheme?
Well, both Rwanda and the United Kingdom have made it clear that the scheme is uncapped. And indeed, when I visited Rwanda a few months ago, I visited some of the new accommodation that is being constructed for the precise purposes of supporting people who will be relocated to Rwanda. So, with respect, I disagree with her, and there is potential in our agreement with Rwanda. We have confidence in its lawfulness, and we hope to deliver it as soon as possible.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So the Court of Appeal has ruled that the government cannot send refugees to Rwanda. The scheme would cost taxpayers tens of thousands of extra pounds per refugee, yet the government still seems to want to spend extra millions to challenge the ruling in the Supreme Court. Has the government thought instead about simply paying for the Arsenal football team's Visit Rwanda sponsorship deal? Because it would cost less and it would achieve more than this gimmick of a scheme.
Well, what disappoints me is that the honourable gentleman is failing to grapple with the challenge and the costs that we are incurring right now, that being £6 million a day on hotel accommodation, £3 billion a year on our asylum system. That cannot go on. And that's why the Prime Minister and I have pledged to do whatever it takes to stop the boats, to bear down on our asylum backlog, and to deliver out our legislation and our partnership with Rwanda.
Ruth Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today's judgment is clear that Rwanda has repeatedly breached its Memorandum of Understanding with Israel. The Home Secretary is a lawyer, so why is she handing over hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money without doing the basic work to check that the arrangements are legally sound?
Well, this judgment and this dispute is about our partnership and our agreement with Rwanda, which was secured last year. And as the Lord Chief Justice found, that it is subject to robust monitoring, a committee that inspects its operation, and very strong and robust assurances from Rwanda on its delivery. Those give me confidence, and that's why I'm determined to roll it out as soon as possible.
And finally, Andrew Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A third question on the government's spend on money here of the last four, because the judgment today stated that the Rwandan system for refugees is neither reliably fair or effective. Why then did ministers sign up to sending £140 million to Rwanda without checking this first?
Well, we've been upfront about the costs of our partnership with Rwanda, and that is a matter for public record. But what is absolutely clear, and I'm sorry that I have to repeat it again, John doesn't seem to be getting the point. We are spending £6 million a day on hotel accommodation and £3 billion a year on our asylum system. That cannot continue, and that's why we'll do whatever it takes to stop the boats.
Thank you. That concludes proceedings on the statement from the Home Secretary. I thank everybody for taking part. Point of order, Sir William Cash.
Very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I strongly support what the Home Secretary has been saying, but I am concerned that when the bill from the House of Lords returns, which will be quite soon, we hope, which is dealing with these matters, that in the ping-pong we won't in any way be inhibited by the fact that there are judicial proceedings being dealt with at this point in time, because it's going to be really quite a very important debate, and we really need to be able to do it with as much latitude as possible. So I seek your guidance. Perhaps you could give some thought to that, if I may.
Duty does not apply when legislated.
I thank the honourable gentleman, right honourable gentleman, for his point of order, and it is a point of order. That's a good start. And well, points of order aren't usually points of order. And I can assure the right honourable gentleman that sub judice rules do not apply while legislation is being considered. While the actual process of legislating is underway, sub judice rules don't apply. So the honourable gentleman need not worry on that ground. Thank you.
I beg to move that the House be now.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Mr. David Davis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 20th of January last year, I opened a backbench debate on the use of lawfare and slaps by those seeking to suppress public debate, bully people into submission, and conceal vital information that is in the public interest. Free speech matters. That's a truism of our age. But why does it matter? There are many reasons, but an important one